Chat 301 303. Welcome everyone. So, welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. I'm a psychiatrist practicing in Boston. Just a reminder, everything we discuss on stream today is intended to be for educational purposes only, and nothing is intended to be taken as medical advice. So normally this is the part of stream where I talk about announcements. Hold on a second. There we go. So normally this is a part of stream where I talk about announcements. But there just have been a couple things on my mind recently that I wanted to share with y'all today. So we're going to sort of have a different sort of stream. I don't know how long it's going to last. I don't know what we're going to do with it. I'm just going to talk. And there are a couple of different things that I want to talk about. I'm not pregnant. So the first thing is that yesterday there was a post on our subreddit from someone who I assume was in Michigan, where there was another school shooting. So someone who posted who was apparently a student at the school, who had just lived through, I'm presuming, a school shooting. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit today. There was also a post in our subreddit also yesterday about misogyny in our community. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that today. And then I'm not really sure where that's going to go. So the first thing is that I don't know that anything I'm going to say today is going to be the right thing to say. I don't know that it's going to be the informed thing to say. It's just sort of what I feel like saying. So for those of you, so for example, there's not going to be any references today. We may talk about science and stuff a little bit, but it's going to be just like what I know. But it's just the way that I try to approach these problems. And the first thing that so let's just talk about the school shooting. So the first thing is that I don't know what we can do about this. So this happens periodically. I think 1 year ago, there was a school shooting about a year ago, and like a bunch of media outlets and stuff reached out to me. On Monday, I'm actually going to be speaking on a panel at the United Nations Counterterrorism division about violent extremism and like online communities. So it's just bizarre that like literally on Monday, like there's going to be a UN thing where we're going to be talking about this stuff. But I think that, first of all, like my heart goes out to the community member who had to live through this. My heart goes out to like everyone else who had to live through this, especially those that didn't get to live through it, and the parents and family members of those that didn't get to live through it. I'm going to need a second. I think I'm out of tissues. GG chat. So, you know, I don't know what we do about this. Because I think there are problems in the world that we don't know what to do with, right? So like there are a lot of problems out there where people say like, I don't know what we can do. And that's just not good enough, right? So like there are a lot of problems out there where you can't say anymore, like, I don't know what we can do, because there's like literally people dying. Like that's not an exaggeration. And this happens again and again, and it keeps happening. And I think that there's a lot that we don't really know how to approach this problem. So what we tend to do at Healthy Gamer is try to like look at things authentically, right? So we try to like be non-judgmental towards people. We try to treat them like, you know, give them space to like think and understand and try to figure out what's going on. And do I think that we need to understand the psychology of school shooters? Absolutely. But I think that there's like a flip side to this coin, which is the more that we propagate this kind of dialogue, and like the more that, like, for example, there are studies, I believe, that show that increased media coverage of particular things like suicide or mass shooting actually propagates like some of those ideas and beliefs and like leads to more events. So there are studies on suicide clusters, for example, where when you like propagate like media coverage of a thing, that it increases the behavior of the thing. So personally at Healthy Gamer, I feel a little bit hamstrung in terms of approaching this in the way that we usually do. I don't know how to deal with this. Because I think that, you know, really exploring it could actually have the opposite effect. And so we want to understand the psychology of these people, hopefully for the goal of like altering their course. And my hope is that if you support people who are struggling, then they won't do bad things. But unfortunately, I don't think that that's true. I think what tends to happen in school shootings is we talk about mental illness, right? So we say like, oh, this person was depressed. And so there's like pathology of evil. Like that's what we do as a society now. Like as awareness of mental illness has grown, we've actually started to pathologize like evil. And as a psychiatrist, that sort of pisses me off, because I think every time you label a school shooter as mentally ill, you're giving a bad name to people who struggle with mental illness. And to a certain degree, you're providing an excuse for the shooter. So I think this is an issue of dharma and adharma. Dharma being duty and adharma being not being your duty. And I don't know that this is a problem of mental illness. I think it simply could be a problem of evil. And one of the downsides of our society is that as we've stepped away from religion, we've stopped talking about sin. People don't talk about sin anymore, right? Because it's so tied up with religious concepts and beliefs and gets tangled up with other things that discussions of good and evil have been reduced to like, you know, discussions of psychiatry and psychology and like, you know, which in a sense is helpful. But I think that there's a certain point where you have to take responsibility for your actions, irrespective of like whether you're mentally ill or not. I also think as a society, the more that we sort of think about, oh, like maybe what the world needs is more therapy, like that may be true, and it almost certainly is. And that's the way that I would approach the problem. Like I would try to help the people that are in their infancy of becoming a school shooter and try to alter their course. And at the same time, there's a part of me that says like this is an act of evil and there should be no excuses given. I do believe firmly as a psychiatrist that it is not your fault if you are mentally ill, but it is absolutely your responsibility. So I have sympathy for someone who struggles with alcohol addiction, but I do not provide for them a single excuse if they drive drunk and get into an accident and kill someone. This is where if you are struggling with an addiction or a mental health problem, it is your responsibility and it is up to you to take care of it. And I think failing in your duty to do that absolutely lays the blame at your feet. So, was this person mentally ill? We have no idea. Even if the answer is yes, I don't think that that's an excuse. And I think that we as a society need to start calling out evil where we see it. The second thing is, like, I know what I'm about to say is going to be perceived as political, and I guess it is. I don't get to determine what is political and what isn't political. But I'm about to talk about gun control, and most of what I base this on is, like, in my opinion, not political beliefs, but you could argue that they are political beliefs. It's like research out of HSPH or Harvard School of Public Health, where, like, there's a lot of research that's been done. There's some contrary research to this as well. So, for example, like Australia demographically is very similar to the United States, and the number of school shootings they have is like a fraction of what we have because they have strong gun control laws. There's counter evidence to that as well. So, for example, Massachusetts has stronger gun control laws, and there's some data that suggests that it doesn't actually reduce violent crime. But in my mind, like, in growing up in Texas, I can, like, absolutely understand the love that people have for guns, and, like, I have neighbors and family members that really like guns. And that, like, that's totally fine. Like, I get that the Second Amendment is important to people. Like, I have nothing against all that. And I understand that there are people out there that like to hunt. It's a part of their family. It's a part of their tradition. It's part of their rights. Like, that's totally fine. Like, I understand that you guys like to hunt. But the truth of the matter is that every year there are people out there who literally hunt children. Like, that's what's going on. That's not an exaggeration. Someone shows up with a school with a weapon, and then they start hunting, and they hunt other human beings. And so my question to the people who are like, I'm not trying to make it political, but, like, if you are not in favor of gun control, then what I'm curious about is, like, what's your plan? Like, that's what I want to understand. And this is where I'm not saying it, like, as a political belief. I don't say it as an indictment. I say it as, like, a medical doctor and a public health professional. Like, what's your plan to protect those people? So it's fine. Like, I have nothing against the Second Amendment. I have nothing against, like, you owning a gun. And I have nothing against you going hunting, provided it's not kids. And so what I want to understand is, like, for people who are anti-gun control laws, like, literally, what's your plan? And you don't get to say, I don't know, or it shouldn't be this way. Because this is science. This is fact. This happened yesterday. Someone showed up at a school with Michigan and started opening fire. So, like, what are you going to do about that? So it's fine. If you want guns, like, totally fine. But, like, there needs to be a plan in place to literally protect children from dying. And I don't think that that's too much to ask. I think that we've gotten to the point where, like, literally their plan is to... I heard about this recently where they were building a new school. And the architect designed the school with curving hallways. And why did they design the school with curving hallways? To reduce the line of sight for potential school shooters. Like, this is the plan. Like, we're going to get... You're telling me that schools are now being designed by FPS developers? Like, are we going to have random spawns for, like, armor and double damage and teleporters? Like... That's literally what this has come to. Like, your solution is to design a school. And Costco, by the way, started selling bulletproof backpacks. It's like, are you serious that this is what your solution is? That we're going to give kids bulletproof backpacks and design schools so that they don't have line of sight to prevent school shooters? I mean, if that's really your answer, I guess it's a answer, but it feels like a terrible answer to me. And on the one hand, like, you know, like FPS designers should be designing video games, not schools. Like, that's not their job. Their job is to design, you know, hallways for video games, not for real life where there are like 12-year-olds and 15-year-olds who are like walking down the hallway. This is absurd. Yeah, so, you know, I recognize once again that what I said was like political in nature because gun control is a political issue. And that too, by the way, like boggles my mind that issues like COVID and, you know, literally children dying in schools have become political issues as opposed to issues of public health or science or medicine. It's like in my mind, those things are quite divorced, but that could be like my ignorance. And so I just want to understand, like, for people who are in favor of gun control, like, what's the plan, yo? Like, because this keeps happening. People who are anti-gun control. You know, like it's cool. Like, you can have whatever beliefs you want to, but then, like, what are we going to do about that? Like, what's the practical, like, what does it look like? And I encourage everyone, you know, I recognize that people may want to bucket me into a political party or a set of political beliefs based on my statements. But chances are you'll be surprised at how incorrect you are based on my bucketing. And you may try to reverse bucket me based on that statement. And you'll be wrong there too. So I think the next thing that I want to talk about is like, you know, what we can do about it. So I want to share with you guys, I think, a major problem, a major public health nightmare that is already happening. And I don't think many people are aware of what it is. And that is online drift. So there is an interesting thing happening to our minds and on the internet that I don't think many people are aware of. All of the major content platforms are responsible for this. Oddly enough, I don't blame them because I think that they set out with what I think was the best of intentions. And it's just a consequence that it's an emergent property that no one expected when they put together the pieces. And that's online drift. So basically any content creation platform that you look at or content amalgamation platform will serve you things that you like. And so what tends to happen is that there have been scientific studies written about this, where like you start off with some mild piece of content, and then over time, the platform will serve you more and more extreme pieces of content. So there's literally this concept called online drift, where you kind of start in the middle and then you start like moving towards extremes. So I think like good examples of this are, you know, there are like many subreddits around loneliness, right? So there's like Forever Alone, and then there's also like relationship advice, which is like more in the middle, and then you get to Forever Alone, and then you maybe get to like FDS or incel communities or Red Pill or like whatever. You get to these like communities that hold very strong beliefs. I'm not necessarily suggesting that any of those beliefs are bad, but this concept is happening where the internet, by virtue of the way that online drift happens, it's fracturing us as a society. The second thing about online drift that's really important is that it is emotionally engaging content that people select the most. So what happens is, like, if you look at Twitter, like, why is Twitter such a popular platform? It's because 160 characters is a great way to emotionally engage people. If you look at the people who are very popular on Twitter, they're not necessarily right. They're the ones who emotionally engage their audience, like, time and time again. And the people who agree with them think that they're very, very right. And the people who disagree with them think they're so idiotic. But that person succeeds because they've actually emotionally engaged both sides of the argument. So in a weird way, content creation is drifting towards emotionally engaging content instead of like accurate content or helpful content, right? It's all about like what you're going to click on. And so what people tend to click on is that which is emotionally engaging. And so you end up with this like combined process of like emotional engagement plus like content being presented to you, which is more and more emotionally charged, less nuanced, less logical, less like, you know, dyadic, right? It becomes like very monotheistic in nature. And so over time, what's happening is like we're sort of like creating these echo chambers, right? And that's what the internet is doing. The internet is funneling us into echo chambers. And one of the things that we've seen is if you read like manifestos of school shooters and things like that, you'll see like a lot of echo chamber mentality in those kinds of things. And so I don't know exactly what to do about this, but I absolutely see this as a problem. So what I'm going to say now is that you have to be really, really careful about the safe space that you gravitate to. And this is another thing that started to happen, which is that safe spaces have started to become breeding grounds of toxicity. So what happened is like people didn't want contrary opinions, right? So like, let's say you've got like, you know, a gender-oriented sub. So you can look at 2X chromosomes or like men's rights or like whatever. So I'm going to talk about subreddits because that's what I'm familiar with. But you're going to have a gender-oriented community, which understandably the gender has had bad experiences with people of the opposite gender. So we're going to create a safe space just for us. And I think that has a lot of utility to it, has a lot of value to it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Over time, though, what tends to happen is as we knock out contrary opinions, as we knock out discussion, because let's be fair, a lot of the people who come in pretending to discuss are not actually trying to discuss, they're trying to attack. So I understand why it happens. Over time, what tends to happen is we create this echo chamber that then like propagates like more and more extreme views. And then you end up with communities like FDS or Red Pill, right? Which is kind of ironic because they're sort of the same community. It's just fascinating, and so this is something that's a serious problem that I think as a society, we need to be super careful about. Like we need to be aware that content creation platforms, as they chase emotional engagement and dopaminergic clicks, what they're going to be doing is radicalizing us in the process. And this is where you can say like, oh my God, the content creation platforms are bad. Facebook is evil. Google is evil. Twitch is evil. I don't think that that's fair. I mean, you can criticize them and they may be evil. I'm not saying, it's not my place to say. What I'm saying is that like my focus tends to be on individuals. And so you are just as complicit as the content platform, right? Because you're the one who's clicking it. So I don't think it's fair to just blame. And that's another thing that tends to happen in situations like this is everyone loves to blame the things that don't involve them. So we saw this a lot during the pandemic, where everyone was like, doctors are the heroes, nurses are the heroes. Like, oh my God, these people are so great. Like, they're amazing human beings. And then doctors and nurses started saying, hey, you need to get vaccinated. And then suddenly people were like, screw you guys. It's the medical establishment. And so it's very easy to applaud something that doesn't cost you anything, and even easier to criticize something and tell someone else across the street to change. It's really easy to say like, oh, Facebook is evil, Twitch is evil, YouTube is evil, Reddit is evil, TikTok is evil. You know, I'm trying to be like egalitarian and toss the evilness all over the place. But the truth of the matter is that it's easy to say that because you don't have to change, right? Oh, it's their fault. I don't have to do anything differently. And this is exactly how we end up with school shooters. Because for far too long, people have refused to take responsibility. So the NRA doesn't take responsibility. You know, YouTube doesn't take responsibility. Reddit doesn't take responsibility. The government doesn't take responsibility. Legislators don't take responsibility. Individuals don't take responsibility. Parents don't take responsibility. Friends don't take responsibility. Bullies don't take responsibility. Oh yeah, like it's always like someone else needs to fix this problem because they're the problem. And it is because every human mind thinks that way that we end up with the situation that we have. So people in our community ask, how do I do my dharma? What is my dharma? And they think it's some grand thing, right? They think it's like, oh, how do I save the world? How do I become a person who impacts other people? How do I live my life with purpose? So this is what I'd say. Why don't you start by being a decent human being on a very small scale? Why don't you start by not bullying someone else? Why don't you start by not dogpiling the kid who's been, bullied? Right? Why don't you start by being decent in chat to people who come on? Why don't you start by being decent to the parent that we had recently? Be decent to the women that come on. Be decent to the people that you disagree with. Like, start by being a decent human being. That's your dharma. That's the beginning of it, and that's the end of it. Start by accepting responsibility for what you can change instead of blaming the world for not fixing things. We see this with our generation too, and I'm complicit with it. Where I say, oh, the boomers screwed us. And it's like, I've been able to vote for 21 years. And so for like the first 8 years of my life, I didn't vote. The boomers didn't screw us. I screwed us. You screwed us. If any of y'all are not participating in the process, if any of y'all are sitting at home and not doing anything about this problem, then you are complicit. It's the only way it works, man, is if everyone starts taking responsibility for whatever they can do. Right? And this is the kind of thing where we even see oil companies do this. So I saw this hilarious thing, I think that BP or some other oil company was like, what are you going to do to commit to changing, to fixing the climate? What is your climate change pledge? Hashtag climate change pledge. And someone else was like, I pledge not to dump 5 billion barrels of oil into the ocean. Right? That's my pledge. And so everyone's talking about recycling and using non-reusable straws, which is fine. I'm glad people are doing that. So that is people who are not buying plastic straws are a step in the right direction. But individual corporations need to accept responsibility as well. So this is where as a human, if you are gravitating towards communities, participating in communities that are toxic, if you are not exposing yourself to contrary views with a genuine eye for discussion, then you are part of the problem. And Reddit is part of the problem, Google is part of the problem, Twitch is part of the problem, everyone's a part of the problem. That's the whole thing. It's a worldwide problem, so it's everyone has some role to play. Even if it is not, this is the other thing. So even if you are not part of the problem, you can absolutely be part of the solution, and that is part of your dharma. So the only way this works is if we all do what we can do, even if it isn't our fault. And so if you want to know what doing your dharma is, it's be a decent human being, which is harder than it sounds. I make it sound simple, but it's very hard. It's be careful what you consume on the internet. Try to be compassionate towards people that you dislike and who may disagree with you, and we'll get to that later. And that's your dharma. The next thing that I want to talk about is the science of trauma, and sort of almost responding to the person who posted. Who I don't want to show the post, just for the preservation of privacy and whatnot. So there's some things that, I don't know if people educate. I'm really curious, what that school in Michigan is going to do for their students afterward. Right? So I haven't seen, and maybe this is just me, but I haven't seen any clear messaging on the science of trauma or how you should respond after a school shooting. What should you do? So once again, this is not very well researched. I mean, it's sort of well researched in the sense that I've learned a lot about it. So I've got a lot of research in my brain, but it's not exhaustively studied or cited or up to date. So here's what y'all need to understand about trauma. So the first thing is that psychologists discovered that processing trauma is useful. Okay, so this is discovery number one. So then what people decided, psychologists were oh, there's genocide going on in Africa. Let's go and therapize them. So a bunch of mental health professionals showed up, and they processed trauma with people immediately after genocide. So you'll have these survivor camps, right? So refugee camps, asylum seekers, things like that. And we're going to make the world a better place. We're going to go in and process that trauma for them. We're going to fix them. That's what we're going to do. And so what they actually discovered is that forcing people to process their trauma makes things worse. So what tends to happen after a traumatic event is that we feel numb. We dissociate, right? We feel detached from all sorts of things. You don't really you just kind of feel numb. Food doesn't taste great. Food doesn't taste bad. Things don't seem to be fun. You're kind of in this fog in your head. You're sort of numb is the best way to describe it. It's sort of the volume on life is turned down. The brightness on life is turned down. You kind of unplug. You don't feel connected with yourself. You don't feel connected with your life. There's a dissociative process that goes on. This dissociative process is protects you from the negative emotions, right? Because you just went through something that was traumatic. So there's like a very like clear physiologic process that goes on when we feel strong emotions. Our hormones go through the roof. Our brain starts to activate in all these weird ways. We enter periods of strong neuroplasticity, which means that our brain rewires. So if you look at the limbic circuit of the brain, the limbic circuit is the emotional circuit. It is right next to the hippocampus, which is the learning circuit. Our emotions and our learning circuitry is very closely tied together, which is why the greatest teacher for human beings is negative emotion. This is why you can be married to someone for 40 years, see them cheating once, and divorce them. Because 40 years of good behavior can be wiped away with one bad lesson. Right? Like, that's just how learning works. You can use a stove every day for 40 years, and like one day something happens, a spark lights, your house burns down, and you're like, I ain't never touching a stove again. Your brain will have like PTSD from having stoves in the house. That is absolutely the way that we are wired. So forcing re-experiencing of trauma essentially reactivates all of those negative emotions, reactivates the hormonal surges, the physiologic changes that come with the first round of trauma that wreck your body, by the way. Because remember that when you're undergoing a traumatic experience, it's a survival situation. So your body activates all of these circuits to survive the next 10 minutes, no matter what happens tomorrow. So in that moment, what your body and brain do is they go all in on survival, and they will wreck the house as a result. The way that I kind of think about it is, let's say you're about to leave for the airport and you can't find your passport, and your Uber is 3 minutes away. You don't care about organizing things. You're dumping things off the shelves. You're like looking in here. You're emptying out drawers. It's a frenzy of a mess to find your passport within the next 3 minutes. And in those 3 minutes of shooting for looking for that one goal, you will wreck your entire house as a result. This is what happens physiologically when you go through trauma. Your cortisol level shoots through the roof. Your insulin goes through the roof. Your decreases, actually. Your blood sugar shoots through the roof. All of these systems in your body go haywire for the sake of temporary survival, and we'll clean up the mess tomorrow. So when you force people to re-experience trauma before they are ready, and this is important as well for certain techniques of meditation. That's why I do not do open awareness techniques of meditation with traumatic individuals. Their mind is working really, really hard to pack away those memories. They've worked really, really hard to like bury them in the basement and put locks and chains and weights on top so that the trapdoor can never open. And so when you get clinicians that force people to process their trauma, or you get meditation techniques that let the trauma come up, then you actually re-traumatize the person, trigger all of those physiologic disruptions, which result in neuroscience changes. Those neuroscience changes will in turn affect your behaviors, your patterns of thought, etc. So don't do that. Don't force people to talk about things. So then the question is, what should you do? Play video games. So this is one of the really fascinating things. There was a study that was done where they had trauma survivors play Tetris, I think. And what they found is that Tetris is actually like really, really beneficial for trauma survivors. Okay? So I know it sounds kind of weird, but like this is where like, what do video games do? They cause us to dissociate, right? That's the problem, is they cause us to forget life and push away all of our cares and worries and problems. And as long as I'm playing Dota or League of Legends or Valorant or whatever, like I'm not worrying about any of my stuff. So like no big deal. So this is one of the situations in which video games can truly be therapeutic because they assist in the dissociative process, right? And this is where people ask, are video games healthy or not healthy? No such thing. Every tool has a place. Is a hammer a good tool or a bad tool? It's a hammer. If you drop it on your foot, it's bad. If you use it improperly, you're going to break a finger. But used in the right way, it can be very helpful. Video games are exactly the same. So oddly enough, I would encourage people to like follow what your mind tells you to do. If you want to veg out and play a video game, you just want to play Terraria for like 8 hours after a traumatic event, I'd say go for it. Let your mind do what it needs to. It's going to be subconsciously processing stuff, and that's actually okay. So what should you do after a traumatic event? Play a video game. There's actually data to support that. Okay? So, that covers school shootings. So yesterday, there was a post on our subreddit about how there's a misogyny problem in our community. And so I really appreciate the post. It was the most upvoted post for, a while. There's some upvoted posts, like if you look historically, the most upvoted posts are memes. The most upvoted substantial post we've ever had on our subreddit, I think, was this post. And in it, people were sort of saying, like, misogyny is a problem in the community and Dr. K should use his platform to address it. And then I got kind of confused because I was like, I don't know what that means. I don't know. I hear this a lot. Like, people toss around this phrase, use your platform to address the problem. And literally, like, I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know how to do that. Do I just show up here and say misogyny is bad? Y'all should stop doing it? Is that what people are looking for? So I asked the question, and thankfully I got some awesome answers. So I was like, I think they figured out what my username is. So I think they knew it was me. But I don't identify myself. But I was just like, what would that practically look like? Like, what would that mean using I don't know how to do that. And so I got some really awesome answers, and I really appreciate everyone who posted. I read the entire thread and basically every comment. So the first thing that I'm going to do is share a little bit about, what we do and how we approach misogyny. And then I'm going to change gears a little bit. So the first thing is that, we try to address misogyny through things like we have women in gaming streams and stuff like that. We interview a lot of female streamers who will talk about their experiences, for example, or just women in our community who talk about their experiences. So that's one way that we address it. So I thought we were doing okay there. The other thing is that I tend to not sometimes address it directly because I think that the real way to address misogyny is by addressing the human being underneath and understanding where it comes from and sort of helping people. So for example, Shunya meditations, I think, are actually my way of addressing misogyny, because the more that you practice Shunya meditation, the less misogynistic or misandristic you will become. So I think there's a lot of stuff that I try to do. And then there was also another part of me that was kind of confused because I was sort of thinking, if this is a misogynistic community, why is this one of the most upvoted posts of all time? Right? So it was kind of interesting because I was looking at that and I was like, oh, people are actually responding really well. And I was imagining if someone had posted that in the Red Pill subreddit, for example, that would get downvoted into oblivion. And then I also kind of thought about it a little bit more and I was like, but wait, it's the most upvoted post. So that means that everyone does think it's a problem. So that was kind of confusing for me. So I tend to, first of all, address things somewhat indirectly. And the reason for that is I just think it's more effective. So this is where I get concerned about things like virtue signaling. So if I show up on stream and I say misogyny is bad, I think that the people who suffer from being on the receiving end will really appreciate that. And they'll be like, Dr. K is using his platform to address misogyny. But I don't know that the person who is misogynistic will actually change. So this is where I kind of struggle a little bit with is fixing misogyny validating the victims of it? Or is it trying to change the minds of the perpetrators? And so that's sort of why we've done what we've done. We try to raise awareness of it and things like that. And I'm directly addressing it now. So this is what I'm going to say to my strategy, right? And so this is my first thing to say to people who are not just misogynists, because I don't know if you identify as a misogynist. So here I am, and I have a strategy, right? We have women in gaming, what's your experience like? We interview female streamers, and hey, look at all this logic that I'm using. I'm saying it's the most upvoted post, right? Our community is they appreciate this. If it was truly a misogynistic community, they would downvote it into oblivion. So there's a lot of like beliefs that I have about how to address the problem. There are a lot of things that I do to try to address the problem. And despite all of my efforts, and despite all of my logic, and despite all of my idea that I think I'm doing a decent job, someone out there is telling me that, hey, this is a problem. So here's the first thing. If you think you're doing a good job at something and someone tells you, hey, this is a problem, you should start by listening. So this is kind of weird, but like in my experience, the more that you think you know about something and the more surprised you are by someone's opinion, you shouldn't double down on what you believe. You should actually listen to that person even more. So if you saw that post and you thought, sort of like I did, that like, oh, look at how much this is getting upvoted, it must not be a problem. You have to understand that like the more logic that you have to discount their perspective, the more catastrophically incorrect you are. Right? Because they're not stupid. I mean, you can assume that other people around you are stupid. But despite all of the reasons why I think we're doing a good job of addressing misogyny, the fact that there is a group of people who strongly feel this way means that there's a blind spot. So if you have a lot of logic about something and people are saying things that are contrary to that, that is actually an indication that there's a blind spot. So here's what I'm going to do, because here's my way of trying to address the blind spot, okay? So I don't know exactly what to say or how to fix that. I'm going to do my best right now, and we'll see whether it moves the needle in the right direction or not. Okay, so the first thing that I want to say is like, I acknowledge that if people think this is a problem, even though there are a lot of signs that we're moving in the right direction, if you think it's a problem, I'm just going to accept that at face value. And if y'all think it's a problem, okay. So then the question becomes, okay, what are we going to do about it? So I'm just going to share with y'all what I have learned about the experience of women. So understand that this has a couple of caveats. The first is that I'm not a woman. So I am not ever going to truly understand what it's like to be a woman. Thankfully, I've had a lot of experiences, so I have a profession in which it is my job to try to understand people's experiences that are different from what my own. And so I'm going to share that with you just so that I hope that men out there will like hopefully understand like a little bit of what I've learned. It's not my place to say that this is right or wrong. It's not my place to say that, you know, I can't judge that. I'm just going to share what I've learned. So basically, before you're born, presuming you're not like a test tube baby or something like that, your dad has testes. And in these testes, they produce sperm. And sperm have either an X chromosome or a Y chromosome. And then that sperm travels to the egg, which has an X chromosome. And then depending on whether it gets fertilized by an X chromosome or Y chromosome, you are fucked in life. So if you get fertilized by the Y chromosome, you start to play life. I know it sounds kind of weird and this is going to be controversial. We'll get to this in a second. You start to play life on easy mode. And if you get fertilized with an X chromosome, you start to life on hard mode. Like it happens then, like in the embryo. And then there's going to be a lot of people, and we're going to get to this in a second, but what about all the difficulties that men face? So we'll talk about that in a second, and men do face a lot of difficulties. I think we've done a good job of addressing those and validating those. We'll talk about that a little bit more. So if you reject that statement, that's totally fine. Just listen till the end, okay? So you may wonder, like, what do you mean, Dr. K? Like, men commit suicide, women commit suicide, like, men struggle, women struggle. Like, how are you able to say that? And this is where I'd say, like, go back to the first thing that I said is, if people are telling you this, even if it goes against your experience, maybe that's a sign of a blind spot. So here's what I've learned. So the first thing, people talk about circumcision. Now, circumcision is a problem, right? So like, sure, circumcision is a problem, but there are literally parts of the world where when women are born, they will cut off their clitoris. Like this happens, right? Female genital mutilation, like circumcision, sure, I'm not saying that circumcision isn't a problem as well. But they're like literally parts in the world. Just think about that for a second. So like, if you want to understand why being born a woman is on hard mode, it's like, there's maybe like a 10% chance that they're just going to lop off the end of your dick when you're born. That is why it's hard mode. This happens, right? So there are lots of developing countries where like you don't get to go to school You're told to wear particular things. You're forced into marrying particular people. You may be abused. You may be gang raped. Like, there are all kinds of things that happen primarily like to women, right? So this is a bad experience to have. And people will say like, okay, that's developing countries. Like, what about the women here? And so that's where I'd also say, like, it's hard mode for them. Like, that's been my experience being married to a woman. Like, I think things are like harder for my wife than they are for me. And this is where, once again, a lot of y'all may be like, simp cuck, whatever. But just think about this for a second, okay? So here's what I think is hard being like a modern woman, which is that the default responsibility is yours. And if you know what that means, you know what that means. And if you don't know what that means, like, that shows you the problem. So what do I mean by that? So it's like, if a dude, so if I'm married, for example, and I play Dota for like 4 hours a day at night, stuff still gets done. My kids will be put to bed. My kids will be fed. They'll wake up the next day. They'll have clean clothes. Like, stuff just gets done. But the reason it gets done is because it's the default responsibility of women to take care of all that crap. Who does PTA meetings? Right? Who makes pediatrician appointments? And so as a man, like, I help out around the house, right? So we say help out, which also, like, one person is doing the helping and one person holds the default responsibility. You guys get that? It's even in the language that we do. Like, we use, like, shows the dynamic. So I think one of the hardest things about being a woman is that the default responsibility falls to you. Now, I'm not saying that men out there don't accept responsibility. There are default responsibilities that men have as well. So for example, if there's a clogged toilet, like, I take care of that, right? The default, like, I just think in my mind, if there's a clogged toilet, like, I have to take care of it. So there's a lot of default responsibility that falls onto women. So like, here's kind of another example of, so I saw this post recently. We're going to just, I don't want to get too much into it, but so my husband is the moderator for a few different subreddits, and he genuinely thinks it's his job. My husband refuses to look for a job, even though I think it would be good for him, and we could use the additional income, but he says he's got too much on his plate already. That being monitoring these stupid subreddits. Every time I bring it up, he claims what he's doing is unpaid labor similar to that of a homemaker, but he doesn't cook or clean or do any of that the way he used to. He just monitors his stupid subreddits. I don't know what to do. Sometimes I want to leave him because I believe I may not be able to reach him. So this is where a lot of people will react. Right? And so what reactions are people going to have? They're going to be like, that's a bad characterization of a man. That not all men are like this. That women do this too. I'm married, or my girlfriend sits around and doesn't do anything all day as well. So I want you guys to notice, if your mind had that reaction, I want you to notice what just happened. Someone shared with you an experience, and the first thing that your mind did is reject it and provide logic. This is the problem, right? So if you guys want to understand why misogyny exists, this is the problem. It is because when someone speaks, your default mode is to reject them. This is the reasons you're wrong. This paints a bad light to men. And all of those things are logical. I'm not saying that it paints men as deadbeats. It does that. The question is it fucking true? Are these the experiences that this group of people has experienced? Like, is this what they live through? Is it a solo experience or a shared experience? Why do y'all think that had 78,000 upvotes? It's because that's a shared experience. So I'm not saying that any of the criticisms or responses to that post are invalid. I think chances are they're all valid. And at the same time, if your mind defaults to rejecting someone else's opinion just because you have some piece of information that doesn't line up with their experience, that's the problem. That's the blind spot. So start by listening. The last thing that I want to do is share with y'all a little bit of what I've understood about what being a woman is like, okay? So generally speaking, life can suck, right? We just talked about, trauma and school shootings and coping and stuff like that. So like, what do we, especially on Twitch and as gamers and things like that, what do we do when life sucks? We go play video games. Here's the worst thing, is like, women don't get to do that freely, right? So when you show up in a game and you use voice chat, people either start hitting on you or they troll you or start insulting you or tell you to go back into the kitchen. It's like the things that you should be doing to have fun suddenly have these random people in it that are ruining your experience. And there's no escape. So I saw a post like just the other day about some woman like ordered DoorDash. And so the dude knows her address, shows up and starts hitting on her when he's like delivering food. Like, what the fuck? Like, how is that fair? Like, have you guys ever been hit on by someone who's delivering food? It's not something that I even think about. Like, when I get food deliveries, I don't worry about this person. Like, you know, I don't have to worry about feeling self-conscious. Whether you go to the gym, whether you like go to like a coffee shop, like whether you play a video game. It's like there are going to be people out there that's like the vagina apocalypse, where it's like all these zombies out there that are like vagina, vagina, vagina. And you just can't go anywhere without like this shit happening to you. And if you want to understand what this is like as a man, this is what I'd say. Imagine your mom was everywhere. That every person you ran into was your mom. Every time you join a video game or you're in a voice chat lobby, your mom is there. And she's like, have you taken out the laundry? Did you do your homework? Imagine that no matter where you go, your mom is there. You go to the coffee shop, you pick up a coffee, your mom's behind the counter, and she's like, hey, did you do the laundry? Did you do your homework? And then you're like, I hate this. You're walking down the street, you decide to go work out. Your mom walks up to you, and she's like, hey, did you do the laundry? Did you do your homework? And you're like, fucking hey, leave me alone. Then you go home, and you're like, I'm going to play games with my friends. Your mom hops into Discord, and she's like, hey, did you do your laundry? Did you do your homework? There's no escape. Wherever you go, you log on to Twitch chat and someone else like says something and then your mom shows up in Twitch chat and she's like, lol, noob, did you do your laundry? Did you do your homework? There's no escape. It sucks. I don't know like what to say besides that. It's like everywhere you go, like you're getting aggroed by your mom. That's the closest analogy, like, is I've tried to understand this because this just hasn't happened to me. The closest analogy I can think of is it sounds like these people are being hounded by their moms. Like, that's what it feels like. Wherever you go, it's the same shit. It's just zombies wanting vagina. Like, that's all they want. It's like, you know, that's just... And you can't escape it. Now, to be clear, I don't want to say that the majority of people are like this because there's some interesting statistical stuff going on here. So, for example, like when women say all men are assholes, I don't think all men are assholes. I don't think the majority of men are assholes. I think what happens is if you're a dude who's an asshole, you move around a lot more, right? So, like, if you have, like let's say you have 10 women and 5 dudes. Like, if 4 of the dudes are decent, the asshole is going to move from relationship to relationship. And then, like, eventually you're going to have, like, you know, all 10 women have dated an asshole and they ended up with like one decent human being. But like the sample size is highly skewed by the fact that assholes move around. So it's not that the majority of men are like this. It's just that like, you know, what happens is some guy who shows up on the Discord server and is misogynistic there and is an asshole gets banned from Discord, and then he shows up somewhere else and he gets banned from the next one. He shows up somewhere else and he gets banned from the next one, gets banned from this chat, gets banned from this video game. And so like the people who are like, you know, getting banned are the ones that are moving around and exposing themselves to more people. So I think it's unfair for women to sort of assume that most men or all men are like this. And at the same time, I think like as a dude, you've got to be super careful because you don't understand really what their experience is like. And like the next time that you are in a lobby with a woman, like, and someone is mean to them, just tell your mom to go fuck off. Right? And then that person is going to get mad at you too. They're going to call you a simp. They're like, oh, simp. It's like, no, bro, like I'm not a simp. Like you can call me a simp if you want to. It's called being a decent human being. If you think that's being a simp, okay, fine, whatever. And here's the next thing. If you are like nice to a woman online, don't friend them afterward. Just go on your fucking day. Just be nice to them, stand up for them, call out shit where you see it, and then don't try to form a relationship. They don't owe you shit. Just that's the end of it. The best thing you can do is just move on with your day. They're just another human being. You don't need to form anything. You don't need to emotionally support them. You don't need to like help them feel validated. You just need to be a decent human being, move on with your day. Do you guys get that? Because this is what happens. Like there's the people, the Dharma chads, right? Like, I'm gonna make the world a better place. Let me friend this person and help them with all of the things that they need help with. I shall force them. I shall, much like the therapists who are post-traumatic, I'm gonna fix it. And in doing so, you just make it worse. So being a decent human being does not mean you need to form a relationship. It's like, you know, the next time if someone drops their books in your class, you just help them and you go on with your day. You don't expect anything in return. That's it. Right? So just to kind of summarize about misogyny. So we address it a little bit differently. Like, I'm not a huge fan of virtue signaling. Like, I just don't think it's effective. So I think a good example of this, I remember having a conversation about when Trump won the election in 2016 and people being really shocked by this "buy the pussy" comment, right? Can that get me banned if I say that? Okay. I won't say it again. But so, you know, our president, I'm just quoting the actual former president of the United States here, you know, made a comment about grabbing women by a particular body part. And I think that, like, a lot of people called him out on that. But I think what people don't understand is that he won more votes than he lost. But with that comment. That attacking that comment and the people who resonated with that comment did not change their mind. It actually had the opposite effect. So I'm not saying I'm right here, but this is my justification or my reasoning why I try, like, to not just attack misogyny, which there are a lot of people out there attacking misogyny. I have no problem with that. Like, by all means, y'all do your thing. I'm going to do my thing. And at the same time, like, I think that if you know, just to kind of summarize, like, if someone is saying something to you that does not fit, that you think is logically incorrect, understand that, like, your logic is not better than theirs. I mean, it may be, but that doesn't, it could be a blind spot, right? Like, you are not, and it's shocking, you're not the arbiter of truth. So maybe try listening to other people and, like, listen to what they say. And, like, pro tip, like, if you see toxicity, like, maybe do something about it. Pro tip, be aware of your own emotions and recognize, like, what are you looking for from this relationship? And what is, like, this person's experience? Just be like a normal person and just get on with your day. If they want to play a game, like, you play a game. That's totally fine. You don't have to, like, talk to them afterward. Just go about your business and let them go about theirs. And if you want to understand why, like, you know, being a woman is living life on hard mode, you know, it starts with things like genital mutilation, moves on to things like laundry and things like this post, and then ends up with, like, even the spaces that we as men use to chill and relax and degeneracy, like, they don't get to do. Like, that sucks, dude. It's like being hounded by your mom all the time. Wherever you go, same fucking story. I don't know how these people are still sane on any level. It's insane. So next thing that I want to talk about is community. So here at Healthy Gamer, we try to create a safe space, sort of. I actually don't like that term, but we try to create a place where people can, like, look at themselves and work on themselves and better understand themselves. We want it to be safe, but I think of it as like a place where you can be challenged as well. So I sort of think about rock climbing with a safety rope, right? So sure, it's a safe space. But I don't think about, you know, like a house with padded walls where you can never injure yourself. So I think the challenge is that there aren't many safe spaces for men. So we welcome men who need a safe space. I think the challenge then arises that it becomes a men's safe space, or a safe space for men. And that's, like, not okay, right? So we didn't create this place for any demographic. Even we call ourselves Healthy Gamer, we're not for gamers anymore. Like, we're for gamers, but we're not, like, I learned this. Did you guys know that the average 50% of our audience is over the age of 34 at this point? Like, what? 50% of our audience is over the age of 34. So this is no longer for gamers. Is it for y'all? Absolutely, but it's not exclusively for you. Is it a safe space for men? Yes. Is it a safe space for men? No. This is a place for everyone, right? So that's why we do like shunya meditations, ahamkar, ego. Here I am saying that whether you're a man or a woman, sure, I know it sounds kind of weird, it doesn't matter. Are your experiences different? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, like, you're a human. And what we try to like create a safe space for is like people. And I don't, in a sense, I sort of blame people, but I forgive people for wanting to be protective of this as a men's space or a woman's space or whatever. And the reason is because I think that there just aren't enough of them. So like, this is very like psych, not even 101, psych 001. Why do people fight over stuff? So why do kids share candy or not share candy? So my kids are like pretty good. They share candy. Why do they share candy? Because they have as much as they want. Why do some of the kids in their school not share candy? Why do they snatch candy? Because they don't have enough. So when it comes to being kind and being welcoming, what we need to understand, or this is my take on it, is that like people are behaving this way because there isn't enough safe space to go around. So I remember one time being on this thing called the street team in Boston Healthcare for the Homeless. So this is where as medical doctors, you like literally walk the streets. Like you walk around because the homeless, the people who are homeless are not going to come to the clinic. They can't get their way to they can't make their way to the clinic. So you literally like, you walk around, you travel around town, you see homeless people, you try to provide healthcare to them. It was a really awesome experience. And so one day I remember seeing that there was a trash can that had fire around it. And like people were like shoving each other out of the way, right? Everyone was trying to get close to it because it's cold and it's Boston, it's January. And so like, why are people doing that? It's because there's not enough heat to go around. So as a society, somewhere along the way, that like there's not enough heat to go around. People are feeling both sides, both genders are starting to feel like there isn't a space for them, right? So we had like a women's Discord. So we created a separate space, like a women's space on our Discord. And then understandably, some men got upset and they're like, where's our safe space, right? So there's double standards in gender dynamics. And those exist. They exist sort of for a reason. They're a reality, so we have to deal with them. And this is where I think there's a big problem in gender nowadays because gender issues don't need to be comparative. And I think the biggest mistake that is made in gender-related conversations is that people make them comparative. But women, but men. So if I say that there aren't enough safe spaces for men, what women will say is like, do you know what it's like being a woman? But what about us? And then if we say that there's a women's Discord, the men are going to be like, but what about us? And this, I think, goes back to, once again, there just isn't enough compassion to go around. And so I don't think that creating like a homeless shelter for women, because women in homeless shelters get sexually assaulted at like an alarming rate. Like, is it discriminatory? Yes. And this is the other thing, is we like do all kinds of discriminatory things in society and we try to call it not discrimination, but it's discriminatory. Like, yeah, that's the very definition of discriminatory, is that it's a homeless shelter that only women can use. How is that not discrimination? I'm confused. And it's because like there's some weird cognitive dissonance where people are saying like discrimination is like always bad. I think it sort of is theoretically always bad, but I think that like generally speaking, a homeless shelter where that's only for women, where they don't get sexually assaulted, is sort of a step in the right direction. It's not perfect because it is discriminatory, but like it's a necessary evil in my book. So that's just how I look at it. I'm not saying that that's objectively right. It's sort of like, you know, that's just kind of how it is. So another good example of this is I'm Indian, and if you're Indian, it's harder to get into medical school in the United States. I get discriminated against. My scores have to be higher, and like that's kind of okay, because still my first day at Harvard Medical School orientation, 50% of the room was South Asian or East Asian. So it's like, I think we're doing okay as a race, right? It's like, if there wasn't any, if there was not a competitive disadvantage to being Indian, like the whole room may have been like 80% South Asian and East Asian, like who knows? So I think that generally speaking, we need to be careful about comparing gender issues. I think that it is, so this is the big thing, is that it's multifactorial. I don't know where people got the idea that gender is like, there's like one scale. And if one gender has an advantage, that necessarily means that the other gender is disadvantaged. That there's like one pie that has to be divided equally. I don't think that's the case. I think gender is a complex issue and affects people in different ways. So for example, if you look at like child custody, men are discriminated against. If you look at like prison sentences, men are discriminated against. If you look at these things like household responsibilities, women are discriminated against. If you look at the percentage of women who stick with their husbands when they get cancer, that number is way higher than the percentage of men who stick with their wives when they get cancer. These are statistics. There are differential ways in which society or genders behave. I'm not an expert in that stuff. I just sort of see it. And I think it's okay for like there to be imbalance. Like not everything is going to be evened out. So just another good example of this now, like matriculation in colleges is more than 50% women. Does that mean that we need to start lowering scores to like allow men to go to college? Like, should we start discriminating against women to try to even things out at 50-50? I don't know. I'm not too sure. That's why I have a focus of one person at a time, because then I don't have to worry about solving those big problems. So what I try to focus on is like, for an individual, don't invalidate their experience. Don't do this one-upping stuff. So I see this a lot in trauma as well. So like if you look at trauma group therapy, there's a lot of like one-upping. And people are like, but what about me? So one person will say like, I was abused in this way. And then someone else is like, but what, like that was nothing compared to what I've been through. And so there's a lot of like, you know, like invalidating someone else's experience because you think you had it worse. And you may have had it worse. I'm not saying you didn't. It's just not productive for the other person. Like, I don't think it's productive for either of you, because both people walk away from that like feeling resentful of each other. And so like comparison and, you know, trying to say that women have it better or men have it better, I don't think it's productive. I think that if a particular gender is suffering in a particular way, let's fix that problem because it's a fucking problem. Let's not worry about like what else is going on. Right? So I just don't think it makes sense that women get sexually assaulted more, men commit suicide more. There's no way to balance that equation. Those are just two problems that we need to fix. Y'all get that? Like, it's not, I don't understand why we like compare genders so much. The experiences of these people are different, and that's okay. They're not going to line up one-to-one, and they don't need to. It's just, if you really look at it from a dharmic perspective, there are problems that need to be fixed. Let's just fucking fix the problems instead of worrying about what other problems are out there. So to summarize, you know, we try to create a community in which people can feel safe, be challenged, and grow. That's what we create a community for. And if you're into that, by all means, come on in. It's not a community for men. It is not a community for women. It is not a community for transgender people. It is not a community for a particular race or even a gamer. It's a community for humans. And if you're a human and you want to work on being a better human, you are more than welcome. And if some of you have some shared experiences that you can educate the rest of us about, please do so. And if someone else is sharing with you an experience that does not align with what your own mind produces, consider for a moment that you may have a blind spot instead of telling the other person that they're wrong. If your mind responds by comparison and what about meism, be careful about that. Recognize that that is a consequence of your ego and the fact that your emotional needs have not been met. This is you snatching candy from another person. And so in a sense, it sort of makes sense because you haven't gotten a piece of candy, so you want to snatch it from them, and sometimes that's okay. I know it sounds weird, but at least acknowledge what you're doing. Understand what you're doing. Understanding that you are filling your own emotional needs at the cost of someone else's. Which sometimes may be okay, because maybe your emotional needs are worse. Like, I don't know. Just understand what you are doing. So I have one more thing to talk about. This is going to be the most random thing. So it has recently come to my attention that a significant portion of not only our community, but apparently the internet, likes to watch motivation videos while high on marijuana. And so there's like this group of people who like get high and then like consume self-help and motivational videos on the internet. And so like, let's just start with a what the fuck? Like, just think about that for a second. Right? Like, what is going on in your mind Like, what are you doing? If you get high and watch motivation videos all day, like, what is going on? Have you ever, like, just thought about what system is functioning that creates this output? So these are like the self-help junkies. And what happens is, like, you need to do something, right? But you don't want to do something. And so somewhere in the middle, your mind tricks you into watching a motivational video. It's like, oh, like, I need to do something, but I don't want to do it. So let me see if I can trick my way into being motivated. So I'm going to watch a motivational video. It's this beautiful, like, thing in the Venn diagram of like deluding yourself into, like, doing something productive. Right? So you don't want to do it, but you need to do it. So your solution is, like, let me watch a video about doing it. And therein, you sort of satisfy this part of your mind that's like, oh, this needs to be done. And you satisfy the part of your mind that's like, I don't want to do it. So, and this is why it's, like, so damn addictive. Because you're kind of solving both problems, right? Like, you're, like, solving the fact that you don't want to do it, and you feel like you're moving in a particular direction. And so these are people that are like, if you're doing this, you're looking to make it easy on yourself. So, like, let's understand, why are you even watching the motivation video? What is the goal of the motivation video? You don't want to do it, right? You don't want to do it. So if you watch a video, maybe some switch will flip in your brain, and then you will want to do it. You are hunting for ways to want to do it. You're trying to dodge the bullet of, like, overcoming the desire to not do it. You don't want to do any fucking work. You just want to watch a video that will flip a switch in your brain, and then magically you'll start doing it. Like, what the fuck? Right? And this is where, like, when I talk to these people, it's like they'll, like, when I'm going to watch a video, and then something magical will happen, and then I won't have to exert effort. Watching a video is like rolling the dice to try to find some magical treasure that will not make things effortful for you. You're looking for a way to make it easy for yourself. And when we talk to people about this, they're like, it's boring. I don't want to do this. We see this shit all the time on our subreddit. Where it's like, this is boring. It's not fun. I don't want to. And then it's like, hold on a second. Where did you get the idea that it's supposed to be fun? Where did you get the idea that it's supposed to be interesting? Where did you get the idea that, like, you're gonna want to do it? Like, think about that. Like, where did you get the idea that life is supposed to be fun and interesting? I don't know where people get that idea. And so then what happens is, like, somewhere along the way, they start, like, using marijuana, because marijuana makes things fun, more interesting and less boring, right? And so you smoke up, and then, like, video games are more fun, like, food is more fun, like, this is more fun, and, like, oh, like, I even have these super profound thoughts. And then what you end up with is the addict's brain. So here's something to understand. If you want to understand, like, in a nutshell, what the addict's brain is, the brain of someone who's addicted, no matter how many variables you change, you'll end up with the same answer, which is, I'm gonna smoke weed. What do you mean by variables? So, like, we get these questions all the time, right? Hey, Dr. K, can marijuana be used in a healthy way? Hey, Dr. K, do you think it's okay if I smoke up at the end of the day after I've been productive? Hey, Dr. K, do you think it's possible for, like, marijuana to, like, be effective for anxiety? Isn't it a treatment for anxiety? Look at all the benefits that marijuana can do. Hey, like, did you know that, like, marijuana, oh, like, how do I use it? People, like, are asking questions so that their conclusion is it's okay to use marijuana. I use it for my anxiety. There's some way to balance it. I don't need to give it up. Can it be used in a healthy manner? No. No, it can't. What are you going to do now? You're going to change another variable. But, oh yeah, Dr. K is super smart, except when it comes to marijuana. So this is the addict's brain. No matter what I say, if your conclusion is I'm going to smoke pot, then that is the addict's brain. That's what the addict's brain is like. No matter how many variables I change, it arrives at the same conclusion. And it doesn't have to be marijuana. It can be video games or even things that are non-addictive. Pay attention to when your mind is tricking you and playing you for a fucking sucker. If your mind, no matter what information you give it, bounces back, what is going on? There's clouds outside. But if your mind is bouncing back and forth, and no matter what information you give it, it always arrives at the same conclusion, which is that I want to keep smoking pot. And then it's like, it tells you all these other weird things like, oh, you don't have to work. Just watch more motivation videos, bro. And they're not fun unless you're high. So like, smoke up, homie. So if your answer never changes, no matter what variables change, that is the addicted brain. So like, if y'all are doing this, like, I don't know what to say, man. Stop. And then this is where people say like, oh, just do it. Like, just stop. Easy, bro. Like, no, it's not easy, but why do you think it's supposed to be easy? Where did you get the idea that like things that are like worth doing are easy? Like, no, it's not easy. It's never gonna be easy. And no amount of watching motivational videos is ever gonna make it easy. What the fuck? Like, just do it is like sometimes what you have to do. It's boring. Okay, so what? Does that mean that you can't do it? And this is where you got to decide, like, what kind of life do you want to live? Think about it and make an informed decision. Because this is the other problem is like, you know, not making a decision is the worst decision that you can make. And it's making a decision in and of itself as well. So you have to decide for yourself, like, what kind of life do you want to live? Do you want to live a life that is fun and dopaminergic? And just like, you can do that, but at least understand what you're getting yourself into. Or are you okay being bored? Are you okay with things being hard? Are you okay with like doing stuff that is not boring? I mean, that is boring. It is not easy. Decide for yourself. What are you okay with? And if you say like, oh no, like I just want, like just think about what you're signing yourself up for and what you're actually living. It's like, I don't want to work. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to be unsafe. I don't want to be told what to do. And I just want to be happy. I want to be happy, but I don't want to work for it. Okay. Like, where did you get the idea that that's a possibility? Like, is that an option? Is that an option we're given as humans? Like, I didn't see that option. So what do we do about this, right? I don't know where we got the idea for, like, what the rules of life are, right? Like, where did we get this idea that you don't have to work? Where did we get this idea that it has to be like, it's supposed to be effortless, that it's supposed to be fun? Like, where did we get, like, what are the rules? And so people asked me some time ago, Dr. K, do you have rules for life like Jordan Peterson does? And I was like, no, I don't really. But for the sake of the memes, like, here's 12 rules for y'all. Rule number 1, your spawn point is RNG. Spawn points are not balanced. Like, where you spawn in this world, what your stats are, what your race is, what your gender is, you don't get to pick any of that crap. So understand that your spawn point is just RNG, it's a crapshoot. This is also the concept of karma, where you don't get to control what hand of cards you're dealt in life. You just get to control how you play it. On to rule number 2, life isn't supposed to be anything. Life is a sandbox game. So like, we come into life and we think like, oh, it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be like engaging. It's supposed to be this. I'm entitled to this. You know, I shouldn't have to deal with this. It's unfair this. Life is a sandbox game. It's not supposed to be anything. Life is what you make it. Like, literally, it is the sandbox. It's like, I can go outside and walk around naked if I want to. I can eat nothing but tacos for the rest of my life if I want to. I can work if I want to. I can not work if I don't want to. Life is what you make it, and it is a sandbox game. So let go of what it's supposed to be and look at what it actually is. Rule number 3. It's your choice whether life is PvP or co-op. You get to decide what mode you're playing in, right? And this goes back to all the crap that we've talked about. When someone else needs help, you can choose to invalidate them, tell them that they're wrong, or you can choose to help them. When you need help, you can choose to ask for it. You can attack other people, or you can be supportive of other people. Life is like, it's PvP or PvE, like you get to pick. So try to think about which one you really want and how you're playing the game of life. So are you playing in co-op mode or are you playing in PvP mode? When someone else needs help, like, what do you do about that? Do you help them, or do you spend your time trolling around on the internet posting about, you know, how like the world is sad everyone is screwed up and like, oh, kids nowadays, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. The world is going to shit. Do you just sit there complaining about it, or you like actually get up and do something about it? Next rule. There are world bosses, and these world bosses cannot be defeated on their own. So this is something that we've really, really, really got to understand. So there are problems that we face, like yesterday, I was like, okay, so there was a school shooting and misogyny is a problem in our community. I guess I have to fix those tomorrow. How do I fix those problems? I can't. Dr. K cannot fix misogyny on the internet, and he cannot stop school shootings. I can't do it. I can't stop climate change. I can't do it. So what do I do about that? I get up and I fucking try. Same is true for all the rest of you. It's just like a world boss. You can't down a world boss. The only way that the world boss goes down is if everyone tries to do what is insufficient. That is the way that you tackle world bosses in this world. Everyone tries to do what they know in their hearts to be completely insufficient. No snowflake believes it is responsible for the avalanche. Rule number 5. There is no respawning, and the servers are going to go offline after 72 years, on average. So you get one shot at this life. You don't get to respawn. If you fuck it up, you fuck it up. The servers are going to go offline in 72 years. The clock is ticking. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to play this game? Because you don't have an infinite amount of tries. You don't get to respawn. There aren't one-ups. There's no, there's no cheat codes. It's just, this is what you get. And so how are you going to use it? Next thing to understand. There's no exponential XP requirement to level up, and content doesn't expire. So what this means is that it's not like a video game where the amount of time it takes to level up increases as you get higher level. That's not true. The amount of time it takes to learn something is static. The amount of time it takes to become proficient in language is largely static. The amount of time it takes to learn a video game is largely static. You can graduate from college in 4 years. You can start at 16, 26, 36, or 66. 4 years is what it takes to graduate from college. 2 years is what it takes to put your life together. 1 year is what it takes to start to put your life together. 3 months is what it takes to take the first couple of steps. You can put your life together whenever you want to. The content doesn't expire. You can go to college whenever you want to or not go to college. Content is out there. You can have never had a girlfriend and you can start dating tomorrow. You can be a virgin at the age of 30 and be having a ton of sex at the age of 40. The content's there. It's just when you choose to engage with it. Furthermore, just because you've wasted some amount of time, this is where the exponential XP thing comes in, doesn't mean that you can't do it. That doesn't apply. So just because you've wasted time learning one skill does not make it harder to learn other skills. That's just not true. Right? You can just literally you can, I have a book here, Svara Yoga, the tantric science of brain breathing. And this book takes the same damn amount of time to read, whether I'm 50, 40, 10, whatever. So the work is the same. Do you guys get that? The rest of it is all BS. Your emotions and your being behind in life and what other people have, men have it easier, women have it easier. A book is a book. You read it or you don't read it. The content is there and it never expires. Next thing. Beware people who sell walkthroughs to sandbox games. Okay? So this is the other thing. Remember how we said that it isn't supposed to be anything and that life is a sandbox game? So be careful for people who sell walkthroughs to open world games where you can do whatever you want to. Here in my garage, I have a Lamborghini. Right? So be careful about that. So I'm not saying that there isn't something to learn from those people, and I certainly fall into this category as well, right? Just beware, because there isn't a walkthrough to the game of life. And so if we want to understand this, this goes back to the spawn point, the RNG karma. No one is going to have perfect information about what you should do with your life, and that's because they haven't lived your life. They may understand some approximation of your life. They may understand some pieces of it, but literally it is impossible to put a walkthrough for your life. And anyone selling you a walkthrough for your life that will turn everything around is someone that you should be very careful of. I'm included in that. So watch out for that, because the walkthrough for your life can only be determined by you. You're a very unique character who has your own stats, was born at a particular time with certain starting equipment that no one else has ever had, has your own experiences. You spawn in a certain world where you got exposed to these random people who became your party members, other people who became your bullies. You got aggroed by this thing. You know, like, it's unique. So beware people who offer you generic solutions to your unique life. Next thing. So I know a lot of people in this country, so I think this is rule 6, 7, 8. A lot of people in this community, want to help other people. So here's the thing that you got to understand. If you want to carry other people through content, you got to be geared up yourself, just like a video game. So if I want to carry my friends, and help them gain 1,000 MMR, like if they're 2K MMR and I want to carry them to 3K MMR, I need to be 6K MMR. If you've got friends who are like running low-level dungeons and you want to carry them through it, you need to be geared out. So I know that a lot of people in this community want to help other people, but y'all need to understand, if you want to help another human being, you need to have your own shit in order first. Put on your own oxygen mask before you go and put on someone else's. This actually causes damage. We've had to actually terminate or fire coaches for this reason. Like, think about one, not coaches, one. So you need to get your own stuff in order. Like, I totally get that you want to understand other people. This comes back to dharma as well. People like, how do I find my dharma? Like, oh my God, there's so much suffering in the world. It's like, get your own shit in order, bro or girl. You know, start with yourself. Because if you want to carry other people through content, this is something I know y'all understand. Y'all play video games. If you want to carry your team in Valorant, like, you can be a OTP, like, totally fine. But you got to be really, really good at that trick. Right? You can be a one-trick pony and carry other people with it, whatever. So if you want to help other people, you want to carry other people, you need to be geared out. You need to be decked out first. So your first dharma, if you want to make the world a better place, is fix yourself. Become strong, become independent, become capable, become confident. And then people are like, oh, how do I do that? Beware the confusion of the brain. Beware the complexity of the addictive mind. Here's another tidbit about the addictive mind. It loves complexity. Do you guys get that? The more complex a problem is, the more the addictive mind can like hide in that complexity. The more variables there are, the more things I can try to address or manipulate to avoid the conclusion. So addictive minds love complexity, because then it's like, oh, but what about this? But what about this? But what about this? But what about this? And the more complex the problem, the more paralysis you're allowed. Because I haven't accounted for that yet. I don't need to act yet. What about this? What about this? What about this? Haha, another day has gone by, another week has gone by, another year has gone by, another decade has gone by, because I've been thinking, what about this? But what about this? But what about marijuana for anxiety? Beware the complexity of the mind. It is the refuge of the addictive brain. Next thing, success is dependent on your raid guild. If you want to clear endgame content, you got to find a good raid guild. That's how life works. Life is not a single player RPG. It's an online persistent universe, or offline persistent. It's a persistent universe of some kind, right? And this is where, like, it's a sad truth, but unfortunately it's true. So think about the company that you keep. Between the ages of 23 and 27, I had two groups in my life. I had monks and I had gamers. The time that I spent with monks, I did awesome. The time that I spent with gamers, I did nothing. Between the ages of 32 and 36, I was training at Harvard Medical School. That's one hell of a raid guild, let me tell you what, chat. It is like top-notch raid stuff. They know how to clear stuff. And so what you are depends on the raid guild that you're a part of. It's unfortunate, but it's true. So what we've tried to do is create a raid guild that has all spans, right? We try not to discriminate based on how successful you are, or how much money you make, or whatever. So the truth of the matter is that what bosses you down depend on your raid guild. Okay, so that's rule number 9. So rule number 10. Any build is viable. Don't compare. So this is where a lot of people, this kind of goes back to the people who are offering you a walkthrough. So in the game of life, any build is viable. You can be an author, you can be a doctor, you can be someone who consumes things on the internet, right? So like you can just be someone who just watches YouTube videos and then compiles the best YouTube videos into a 10-minute video every single day. And that can be a job. Any build is viable on the internet. And the more that you get caught up in what other people are doing, the more you're going to like get confused about what your build is. So if you try to mimic a half dozen builds from a half dozen people, then you're going to end up failing. But anything is viable. So a good example of this is if you guys play MOBA. Have y'all ever done this thing where it's like you're playing a game of 5v5, right? So let's Dota, LOL, whatever. And you get crushed by a hero on the enemy team. And you're like, that hero is so OP. You pick that hero in the next game, you're like, I'm a dump on these shitties. What happens? You get owned. And there's a different hero that's OP. And then you're like, oh, that hero is so fucking OP. I'm going to pick that one. I'm going to crush these noobs. You play that one, and you get owned. It's like, stop looking at what other people are playing and start to play your own fucking game. Any build is viable. Just do what you do well. Rule number 11, exploit the meta. So just like video games, life has a meta. We are in a different meta now than we were 50 years ago. There are different problems and different advantages. So for example, we are now in the ADHD meta. What does that mean? It means that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, ADHD was a disadvantage. And it probably is still, on average, a disadvantage today. But we literally have a group of professions for which ADHD seems to be a competitive advantage. So the meta changes over time. You just need to realize what your strengths are, what builds are viable, and play the fucking meta. Because we're trending towards shorter attention spans, so those of you with shorter attention spans are doing way better. For 10 years, I've tried to write a book. I couldn't. My mind is way too Vata. My mind is way too ADHD. I show up on Twitch, look what happens. Play the meta. What's going on in the meta right now? The biggest change in the meta, there are two or three huge changes. The first is that the barrier to publication is like shrinking to a fraction of what it was. What does that mean? That means that in like 50 years ago, if I wanted to write a book, there's a big gap between the author and the reader. Huge gap. I have to write it. A publisher has to accept it. A publisher has to think that enough people will want to read this book. It has to be marketed properly. Now with this thing called the internet, I can write a book and the 10 people that will read it. So what used to happen in publishing is that you couldn't publish a book unless 100,000 people were going to buy it. And then they'd give the author 10%. Right? So like 100,000 people buy it, you get 10%. Let's assume each book is $1. And then so you make $10,000 off of 100,000 sales. Now with the barrier of publication lower, maybe only 10,000 people will read your book. But if you can find that audience and you can write it and you get $1 per, it's a tenth of the cost of, you know, the other book, or you still charge $10, you can end up with 100K instead of 10K. I don't know if I lost y'all in the math. The point is that the barrier to publication is lower. You have solo people making games like Undertale and Axiom Verge and stuff like that. Right? So you can make video games in a way that you didn't used to. You can make more niche games. You can have more niche Twitch streams. Being a DM apparently is a profession now. Right? So like, exploit the meta. Recognize that the meta is changing. The other big thing that's changing about the meta is entertainment is now the most important field to invest in. I think if my kids want job security, they need to be entertainers of some kind. We're automating everything else. So like what happens? As the amount of automation increases in the world, and we don't need humans anymore, as we get more self-checkout lines, as we get Doc in a Box, which is like a machine at CVS that will soon be prescribing you blood pressure medicine, as we get drone delivery by Amazon, as we get AI generated this and AI generated that and automated stuff, and as more human beings are sitting around and don't need to work, Why do you think the anti-work movement is so big? It's because we're quickly reaching the point where human beings don't need to work. It used to be that you had to be a contributing member of society for society to function. It's actually changing. You don't need to work. We're moving in the direction of universal basic income. So now we're going to have a bunch of people who are sitting around with like nothing meaningful to do that they really don't need to be doing. And so old industries are trying to hold on to old standards that are archaic, and then people are unhappy because they don't actually need to be there. So you're going to have a bunch of people with a bunch of time. What are they going to do with their time? They need to be entertained. Why do you think there's such an explosion? I do not think it is a coincidence that automation and the explosion of entertainment goes hand in hand. 30 years ago, how many TV shows were available to watch? Today, how many TV shows are available to watch? Orders of magnitude higher. The amount of entertainment that's being produced is mind-blowing. So exploit the meta. Because the meta is going to change, right? With those of y'all that are GME, crypto, whatever, that ain't going to stick around for a long time. You got to get in on the Bitcoin billionaire train before it pops like the bubble it is, right? You got to get on this. Because the meta is going to change. Your OP strat is going to get patched out, and then you're going to be left with nothing. This meta is trash. It creates such a bad society. It creates a society. Whether you play the society well or not determines whether it's trash or not. Right? And rule number 12. The final boss is you. So, case in point, everyone's talking about problems in the world. We're making them external. So I know it sounds kind of weird. When you play Dark Souls and you're fighting Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, who determines whether you live or die? When I'm fighting against Bowser and Mario, who determines whether I win or lose? When I'm fighting against Sephiroth in FF7, who determines whether you win or lose? So we think that the raid boss is an external thing. But it's not. It's an internal thing. The boss is just the fucking boss. It's not a raid boss. It's not the final boss. It's just another boss. It's just another mob. What's the difference between Gwyn and a skeleton? Nothing. Both of them can kill you. The difference is whether you're good or not. So this is something y'all really have to understand. If you ignore all the other rules, take this one home. And that's the raid boss is you. You're the problem. You're what's holding you back. So time to get good, chat. Get good is absolutely right. And for a meditation for today, this is what we're going to leave you with. Get good. Think about it. Walk. Meditate. What does it mean to get good? What are the things that are holding you back in life? Why the fuck are you smoking pot and watching motivation videos all day? Like, what is really holding you back? Oh, I don't want to. I don't like it. It's boring. I'm not motivated. What is the actionable thing in all of those statements? I. It's not about the skeleton. It's not about Gwyn. It's not about Bowser. It's not about Sephiroth. All y'all have the same problem. I. I don't want to. It's hard. For me. Other people have it so much easier than me. Me. So you're the final raid boss. Just think about it. Everything that's holding you back in life has nothing to do with anything else. Sure, is the world shit sometimes? Like, absolutely. Don't get me wrong. That can depend on your karma and your spawn and your RNG and things like that. We're not saying that Gwyn doesn't exist out there, right? It's not all skeletons and Goombas. There are Bowsers out there. There are Gwyns out there. There are Sephiroths out there. But at the end of the day, how that person affects you and whether you wipe to that person or don't wipe to that person depends on you. So get good, chat. I don't have anything else. I guess we're ending stream. We'll see y'all on Friday. Good luck.